Hey guys, this is Michał from mdbootstrap.com, and in today's video we're gonna create something really fascinating. We'll connect to the NASA API to use their famous astronomical resources. So we'll create an app called Astronomy Picture of a Day, which each day will present a different image or photograph of our fascinating universe, along with a brief explanation written by a professional astronomer. Let me present you how it works. So here we have some amazing astronomical picture together with a title and explanation what this picture is about. And if we change the day, we'll get completely different picture with its own title and explanation. So every day this app presents a feature media for this particular day. And it's also possible to display a video. For example, on January the 4th, we have a YouTube video, we can play it, and as well we have a title and explanation. So on the start, this app will present a feature media image or video for 2 days. So today we have the February the 1st, and if I refresh this app, we'll get astronomy picture of a day for this specific day, so for today. Alright, let's jump into the code. At the beginning you need to generate your API key on the NASA website. So go to api.nasa.gov and fill up this simple form, and after sending this you will get immediate access to NASA API key. Actually you could use my key which is presented in this video, but it's definitely more useful to have your own key, because then you can use it in your other resources based on amazing NASA resources. So after you get this key, you can send a request and get a JSON with the data we need in our app. If it sounds mysterious for you right now, do not worry, I will explain all of this step by step in our tutorial. So the next step is to download MD Bootstrap UI Kit. MD Bootstrap UI Kit is a free UI kit which extend Bootstrap possibilities. So go to mdbootstrap.com, click this big red button, download, and once again download. Unzip it, and open in your favorite code editor. I am using Visual Studio Code. After opening MDB package in your code editor, open index.html file and remove the existing content. You can leave the container, it will be useful for us later to provide some margins to our app. So let's save this, and now we need to get a data from NASA API. So let's have a look at how it works. Here in the docs we have APOD section which stands for astronomical picture of a day, and as we can see we need this link to make HTTP request, and we need our key to send in successfully and to get our data. So here we have, let me paste it here for a second. Here we have the basic link, and here I have my API key. So if I join this together, I can send a request and get my data. Let's try this. and it works. Here we have an explanation of the picture and an URL and any other data we need in our app. It will be a good start to save parts of this long link as variables. So let query URL and let's save this part of the link and let query key and using these two parts we can create a full link. Alright, and later we can add another variables here, and for example add a date to create a request for a specific date. We'll do it later, but right now it's all what we need. Just let me fix the typo and we can move forward. Alright, in our app we'll use Ajax technique. So basically Ajax stands for asynchronous JavaScript and XML, and it let us communicate with the servers, and thanks to this we can fetch this data properly and then we can use it in our app. Here is another typo. It should be URL, of course. And now we are ready to write our Ajax request. First of all, we need to create an HTML request object and save it as a variable. So XML HTTP new Then we will use onReadyStateChange property to specify a function to be executed every time the status of the HTML HTTP request object changes. And here goes our if statement to check if now we have a response from the server. And I know it may seem a bit complicated, but it basically says that if we have a response from the server, if it's successful, we can execute our function. So this for number and this status 200 basically means that everything works as expected, and then we can execute our function and our app in general. Here should be two equal signs. All right. Now we will use JSON parse to save JSON data, this JSON data as a variable, which we'll later use in our app. So let data equal JSON parse this response text. And now we can send our request Here we are using our query full variable. Oh. Alright, and let's see if it works. So let's open console log here. Here we have some error because it should be response, not response. Now it's fine. Alright, let me just move it a bit. So our object looks like this. So we can try to, for example, get this copyright property and to display, to console log this value in our console. So let's copyright data and now let's console log this. And something is wrong, and that's because it should be data, not date. And now it works. Here we can see our copyright value. So that way we can get all this data and then use it in our app. So let's try this and let's save all the value in the variables. So we can just copy this. We'll need a date, an explanation, high definition URL, media type, title, and regular URL. And let's just copy this here to get the proper values from our JSON. And now we can console log all of this data. Let's see if it works. And yes, everything works as expected. So we can start to create our HTML structure. Inside of this container, we'll create a grid with two columns. The first column will be 8 units wide and the second 4. And now let's create an image and remove this source link. And now let's try to put our URL inside of this image in our HTML. So let's remove this console logs, and now we'll give this img element an ID. We'll call it wrapper URL because it will keep our URL. So now we can just write document get element by ID and let's use src attribute, and let's make it equal to URL, and it works. Perfect. Let's do the same with title and with explanation. So in the second column we'll use h5 tag, and let's give it an ID wrapper title, and below let's add paragraph with an ID wrapper copyright, and below another paragraph with an ID wrapper explanation. And now let's catch these elements and we'll use inner HTML, title, here we have our title, and the same with copyright and explanation X. And it works. Perfect. Let's just move it a bit. So we can fix the margins here between paragraphs. Let's add class margin bottom, let's say 2. Yes. Alright, and actually we can make it muted by using class text muted. Now it's better. The next improvement we can make is, instead of using this simple image, we can use MDB component, go to MDB docs, and in the search box type hover effects. And here we have a very nice example of the image with a hover effect and with the link inside. So let's copy this. And we can use it this way. Let's cut out this ID and remove this old img element. And right now, instead of this link, let's remove this. Let's add an ID of wrapper URL. All right. Now it's fine. And now we want to make a redirection after clicking this image. Now we want to open this in a new tab and redirect it to the high resolution picture. So here we have a link. Let's call it wrapper HURL. HD URL, this This is how it should be. All right, and let's add target blank. All right. And now we can get this a element by document get element by ID. And let's catch this href attribute and assign this to HD URL. Let's see if it works. After clicking this image, we should be redirected to the new tab with a high resolution pic. And yes, it works. Now we can also improve our query to get access to the resources, to the images and videos from the past. And we can do this by adding a date to our query. So let's create a variable query date, and we can save it as date plus, and here we can write a date. For example, one important note, we need to write this in this format, so the year is first, then the month, and the day as the last one. Later we will change it to change dynamically, but right now we'll just try it to do it with hard-coded date. And now we can add this to our query full variable. And let's change this to January. Now let's see if it works. And it works, we have another picture. So we can easily change this to any date from the past, and it will always present as other picture. And there is one problem with our app. Now, if the presented media is image, it works fine. But if it's video, the app will crash. Let me show it to you. For example, I remember that the media from the January the 4th was a video. So let me change the date to January the 4th. And here you can see it doesn't work. So what we can do is to write an if statement to place in this demo section different wrapper for different media type. So how we can achieve this? We need to cut out this hard-coded component. Let's create a section. Let's name it demo. And now let's write our if statement. Every time we send a request to NASA API, we get an information about media type. And we can use this to write an if statement and then to create a proper wrapper for the media type. So if it will be image, we'll create a wrapper to properly display image, but if it will be video, we'll create an iframe to display a video properly. So let's write our if statement. If media type equals to video, else, and else will be of course an image, do something else. So now we can get this wrapper. Actually, we can call it in the same matter as we name any other wrapper. So instead of section demo, we'll write wrapper media. So let's catch this element, document get element by ID, wrapper media. All right. And now inner HTML equals video type. Very soon we'll create this video wrapper and we'll save it as a video type variable. But now let me finish our if statement and then document get element by ID, wrapper video src equals to URL variable, and the same for image. So the second condition, if our if statement document get element by ID, wrapper media inner HTML image type, document get element by ID, wrapper image src equals URL, and also a link to URL with high resolution picture. So document href attribute high definition URL. So once again, we don't have these elements yet, so our app doesn't work, but now we'll create it and we'll make our app works again. So first let's define our image and video type. Let image type, and now we want to save in this image type variable an HTML component. The problem is this HTML component is created with multiple lines of HTML. So if we just save this this way, this is our component we used before in our app. You can see now there is a lot of errors and it won't work. And why is that? Because if we want to use a multi lines in side of JavaScript instead of regular quotes, we need to use now we need to use a backticks sign. So you can find this in the left corner of your keyboard, and if we use them, it works fine. So let me just make a quick cleaning here. All right, and we can do the same for the video. Let video type equals and backticks. And now let's go back to MD Bootstrap docs and let's type iframe in a search box, and let's copy the code of the basic example. And let's paste it here. All right. Now we need to also add an ID to this HTML elements that we used in our if statement. So let's copy this and here let's type wrapper video. All right, and let's remove this hard-coded link and the wrapper image. Instead of wrapper URL, there are some errors. All right, it should be inner HTML with capital letters, and we also need to remove this line and this line because right now we use it is in our if statement. And now when we save this, yes, it works. We have our video, and if we change date to see how it works with image, it's also fine. Actually, our app is ready right now and it works fine, but we can make few more improvements. Like for example, we can add a date picker that the user could choose any date from the past, and in this way to see different pictures, different videos from a given date. So to do this, we'll need to use a date picker from MDB docs. One small disclaimer, everything we did so far we built with MDB 3 UI kit, but date picker component is part of MDB Pro, so to use this you need to purchase MDB Pro. So if you have access to MDB Pro, type date picker in a search box and let's copy code of this basic example and we can place it here, and let's add some margin. We can also add some margin to the container on the y-axis to provide some spacing on the top and the bottom of our app. So margin y, let's say 5. All right. Right now the date picker works after clicking this calendar icon, but we can change this, and here in the input toggle section we have this attribute which allows to launch date picker on the click on the input. So let's paste it here and now it works as expected. One more thing, as you can see, this data format doesn't compile with the data format requires by NASA API, because here we start with a year and then goes month, and at the end of the day here is an opposite, and instead of slashes we need to use dashes. So we can change the data format inside the inside of the date picker. Here we have a format section. So let's copy this attribute and let's place it here. And replace the value year, month, day. Let's see if it works. Now it's fine. Now let's change the IDs of this date picker to compile with other IDs used in our app. So in this input we will use wrapper date, and here you can use just date picker. All right. So what we need to do now, after changing the date, we want to send a different request to NASA API with the specific date get resources, that is media explanation and title for this particular date. So instead of calling this function on the start, we want to call it when we change the date. And in MDB docs, if you have a look at API section, here in the events section we can see we have an event date change that let us fire some function when we change the date. So let's copy this and let's put it here, and let's change ID to the ID of our date picker. And now when we change the date, we want to fire our request. But one more thing, instead of open, we want to use date change event. So let me replace this, and now let's call a function NASA request. Of course, right now this function doesn't exist, but we'll create it in a second. So what we need to do now is to wrap all the code we have written so far into the function NASA request. And now one more thing, we need to move these functions inside our NASA request function. Let's save this and let's see if it works. We'll change the date, and yes, it works. All right, one more thing, because right now when we launch the app, it shows nothing, so we can also tell our function to launch on page load, and we can do it easily by creating NASA request function call on load. And here initially it will call the NASA request function and launch our app, and then after changing the date we can get resources for this particular date. But the problem right now is that we still have our date hard-coded, so we need to write a few more lines of code to get this work. To get a date from a date picker, we need to declare a variable, let's say date picker date equal to document get element bad ID, and let's catch our date picker wrapper, and we want to get a value of this input. And now instead of this hard-coded date we can use this variable. Let's see if it works. Initially it shows a picture for today, and that is the 1st of February, but if we change the date it will show us the picture for another day. Alright, it seems everything works as expected. We can change the date, we can see it in the high resolution, it works also with a video, and it launched properly on the start showing a picture for today's. That's it for this project. I hope you enjoyed and you learned something useful today. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel because we publish useful videos like this every week. See you in the next tutorial.